Has it started? Is it live? No. No? Okay. Soon. We are live. Okay. Thank you for being patient while we fix the live stream. Are we not on? Is it not on? It's on, I think. Yes. Is it good to go? Okay. Thank you for being patient as we fix the live stream. Hello to everyone here and to those watching online. I'm Kim Zeman, Vice President of the Board of Trustees. Judy Hart could not be here today in person. So I would like the other Board of Trustees members to come to the front, as well as the staff, the treasurers, the program council leaders, and liaisons. Come on up. We're going to have the whole room up here. Yes, there we go. Well, thank you. I just wanted to recognize these people for all the hard work that they do. And these are people who can help answer some of your questions. There is not one person in this church who knows everything. And it takes a village to keep this faith community functioning. So if I can't answer a question, please go to one of these wonderful people. I wanted to remind everybody that we are all imperfect, but we are kind and loving, and so keep that in mind as you ask your questions. Can we give these people a round of applause, please? Thank you. All right, Peg will now come up to read our opening words.
This is a poem, In Our Circle Again by Sherry Woodbury, and she's closer to the mic, and she's a settled minister at First Unitarian in Omaha. Here we are again in our circle. Let me start again. Here we are in our circle again, a circle of vision and reflection, a forum for deciding and empowering. Here we are at the base of another bridge, another space spanning the shores of today and tomorrow, beckoning us to cross the chasm one day at a time. Here we are gathered again at the cusp of the future, at the boundary that holds this community together. We are here in this circle of love and trust, brought to this moment by a series of choices and promises, by hope and gratitude, by our own shadows, faced and befriended. With a servant's heart and a leader's listening, with a parent's love, truer than all of our inner trembling, let us model the health that we seek for all and lean into community. Somewhere out there, all we dream is possible. Somewhere in here, we are sowing the seeds.
Thank you, Peg. Right. We are going to start with safety first and share some information about our revised safety policy. Revising the safety policy was one of the major initiatives from the board this fall. The policy was last updated in 2019. So in August, we organized a task force to review and revise the safety policy. And the task force members include myself, Oscar Sinclair, Chelsea Krafka, Liz Bonnie Heerman, Peg Pelter, Linda Brown, Melody Vaccaro, and Trey Coley-Lusk. So the revisions we've made are still a proposal until they're adopted at our December Board of Trustees meeting. And you will not be voting on the safety policy at the congregational meeting, but we wanted to share some of the areas that we've revised to keep you informed. We do have some copies of the draft safety policy. So remember, this is still just a draft until the December Board of Trustees meeting. If you would like a copy, please raise your hand. So from the beginning of September through the end of October, we met every other week and had some really in-depth discussions about safety at our church. We agreed that the 2019 policy was a very strong policy, but there were areas that we needed to update and wording we needed to change. And in our discussion, since we recognized that we could not foresee every safety issue We added the following sentence to the section about our safety philosophy. If any exception is requested to this policy, a written request should be made to the minister and the president of the Board of Trustees. So this allows our policy to be a flexible living document. Another major revision was adding a section on a threat response plan. I would really love to live in a world where we didn't have to worry about active shooters in churches, but that is not the reality that we live in. So Section 5 in the revised safety policy outlines a planned response to threats both outside and inside our building. The adopted policy will be available on the church's website after the December 7th board meeting. Are there any questions about the safety policy revisions? Can we get a microphone to the people who have questions? And Jean, are there any questions on the live stream? There is a delay. Okay. Thank you.
Live?
Live. There we go.
There was an incident in Columbus yesterday where Unitarian Church got shut down by the Proud Boys. Does your safety policy, which I have not had time to look at, anticipate sort of more, what we do if we had a targeted threat or demonstration like that that seemed threatening?
Yeah, so there's two different sections. One is a section for like a lockout type of situation. If there's a danger outside of the building, there's a plan in place for what we do in that situation. And then we do also have a plan for a threat inside the building. Are there any other questions about the safety policy? Okay. Well, next, our Treasurer Mandy and Vice Treasurer Jason are going to share some information on the budget, and we do have some copies of that available as well.
Okay, ready to talk about budget stuff? Okay, here we go. Better? Maybe I learned how to raise it. Okay, so. Till I'm this close, I can do that. Hi, we hear me? Okay, good. Okay, so a lot has to happen behind the scenes to make the magic of this church happen. I'm Mandy. I'm interim treasurer, so I am still learning. I'm learning through this budget process about all of the fabulous things that have to happen to keep this church going, from building maintenance to retaining and attracting staff, performers and speakers, cleaning, all sorts of things that go behind the scenes to make this experience memorable for our members. So as we're going through the budget, we had an awesome pledge team put together a great plan. We had a lot of people pledging this year, which was fabulous. I know you probably all got the letter, though. Towards the end of pledge season, we were seeing that when we had our committees and everybody put together what we thought we would need for a budget for next year, that things were going to be short. In fact, it was looking like we were going to be about $100,000 short. So, board got together, we wrote a letter, we had people making phone calls, and members of this church showed up, and we were able to cover a large portion of that. So we are going to be presenting at the board approved, and we're going to be presenting at the winter meeting, a balanced budget of $506,000. Now, keep in mind that this budget, we have moved lay staff to UU midpoint, which is significant. This is one of the goals that we were going for. And this is, according to personnel policies, what we should be doing. We didn't quite get Oscar to midpoint, but he was able to get a little bit closer. So that's something that we're going to have to work on for next year, hopefully, get him closer there. And this budget that we put together does have some assumptions. Some of the assumptions are we are going to have a renter in the fall. Now, right now, we're working with Blue Stem, and we have Blue Stem. If they decide we're not a good fit anymore, we do have some backup plans. So this is going under the assumption that we are going to have a renter in the fall. We are going to have 2 fundraisers this year instead of 1. So mark your calendars. We'll have one in the spring, one in the fall. And we were able to get, through that campaign where we did the letter writing and the board did the phone calls, we were able to get $60,000 in one-time donations. So that was fantastic. And we did have to bring in $15,000 from general reserves, which general reserves is basically surpluses from other years where we have keeping it in storage for in case of emergency, for in case of things that show up. So that does have, we did bring in $15,000 from the reserves to make this happen. So this, because of things like this has been 2 or 3 years now that we've had to do this last minute, hey, can we get a little bit more so that we can be whole? Over this next year, these are some conversations that we are going to have as to where we want to be, what we want to be, and how to make that happen. So this isn't just, yeah, we're going to approve the budget and go from here. We need to start having these conversations throughout the next year so that we're ready in time for pledge season next year and, thinking of different ways to keep our church where we want it to be going, in the direction we want it to go. We weren't able to keep everything. When we were talking about that $100,000 shortfall, we were talking about potentially having to cut staff time. We were talking about potentially having to cut staff, period. But we were able to keep staff. We did have to make a few little cuts. Youth in Action, we're going to be doing twice a month instead of 4 times a month. We are not going to have Wednesday or Thursday childcare. So things like that did have to go, but overall, we were able to keep this church moving forward for the next year. Let's see. Does anybody have any questions for me? We do have. Yeah, I know Harry's got questions for me. We do have copies of the budget if anybody wants to take a look at them. Keep in mind, this is not just you have to come up with your answers today. You do have a chance to study the budget before the meeting, and you can contact anybody on the board and we can get some answers for you. If we don't have them now, we can do some research and get them for you. Okay? Let's see. Karen says, where'd she go? As program council chair, I would like people to know that 12 committees cut their budget from 2022 and 14 committees kept their budget the same as 2022. So that is significant. When we're talking about putting together a budget, our committees did really try to do their best to keep costs to where they thought they need to be lower. Oh, we got a question over here.
How does our church budget compare by category? For instance, percent spent on staff or percent spent on building. Are we out of line in some area that might explain why $500,000 is a little bit of a shortfall?
When we're talking about there wasn't anything really out of something we didn't have any expenses that were like, oh, this is brand new. I mean, there's some things that we have that are a little bit extra because of sabbaticals. We have to have a few more speakers coming in, things like that. But there wasn't really anything that says, hey, this is scary. We all need to look at this. This is upping the budget. Coming out of the pandemic time where we had everything was closed, it brought down some expenses in some ways, things like that. We're coming back into a church where things are open again. So that does impact how much the budget is because we have more costs dealing with people being in the building with regards to electricity and things like that.
Hi. Um, First, I'd like to commend our church for renovating in a way that is strategic and controls costs of energy in the long term. The photovoltaics, the other things we did to make our church sustainable are very positive strategically and cost-wise. And as I understand it, we have an opportunity coming up to further strategically control the energy costs in parts of the building that weren't covered at that time, the sanctuary and the gallery space. So I hope that in the financial wizards can use their wands to make sure that we're able to take advantage of every opportunity to look at the long-term benefits of energy efficiency and renewables as applies to this congregation. We have we are very blessed to have a number of our members who ain't broke like some of us, and they're very generous, and we appreciate them. And I hope that we all contribute what we are able to the strategic cost control and green future of the congregation and our physical plant. I think we've done a great thing so far, and we should continue doing that. I also am looking forward to the safety plan. I wasn't aware of the threat by the Proud Boys in Columbus. I'm very concerned with that kind of thing. They have been in Lincoln. They were present. Luckily, we did not have a clash at the Black Lives Matter protests here, but I am aware of specific people who were coming armed and not in a friendly way. So, don't think it can't happen here, because it has and it can again. So, there's positives in the past and challenges in the future, but we've kept it going this long, and I'm looking forward to being part of it in the future.
Thank you.
Andy, there's a question in the chat about general reserve, and I just told him that you would be covering that soon.
Okay, so yes, when we're talking about general reserves, we're talking about that's surplus that we've had from previous years. So we have the budget, we spend the money, there's surplus, it goes into the general reserves. Now, right now, currently there's about $30-some thousand in that part of the general reserves. That doesn't count, we also have other reserves for there's $30,000 set aside for maintenance. There's $5,000 set aside in cash reserves, things like that. So overall, we do have a healthy reserve, about $90,000. So we do have a healthy reserve. When we're taking putting the $15,000 into this year's budget isn't going to, right, it's not going to overtax the church, so. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said. The balance left is in general reserves? What's the balance left?
Okay, so general reserves is currently sitting at about $30,000.
$30,000, okay.
Yeah.
So obviously before that it was 45 before we took the 15 out.
No, this is 30,000 before we take the 15,000
Okay,
out.
so
So this
there's-
is current standing as of today.
So it's about $15,000 balance left in general reserves.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Wasn't quite clear on that. I assume the music increase for musicians between 2021 and 2022 was COVID overlap on that one? Okay. Sorry, got a couple others here for you.
Nope, we got it.
The I guess just to clarify, the extinguisher alarm service, 2022 budget was 1,250, but we're only at 500 for 2023. Is that the every 3 year?
Yes, that's the every
um,
3 year. So we
Extra
only have the
costs
budget
involved
for it.
in the sprinkler system
Right.
check. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. No increase needed for property liability insurance at all?
That's based off of our best guess estimate and the
just seeing
information
all
that we
the
have right now.
Disasters around the country, you always, it
They
hits
haven't told us
everybody.
yet.
And I'm going to object again, or I guess encourage those making contributions by credit card, and I assume that's mostly where this is line 105.5, I guess, electronic giving fees. Of 2022 budget was $2,500, and the budget for 2023 is $2,000, which means all of us that contribute by cash or whatever form are helping subsidize those paying by credit card. Good or bad, but I would like to see make sure, and maybe it's been investigated or looked into whether Realm, which I assume these credit card payments are coming from, has an option to add on a spot, which I see on many places for contributions to organizations. Please consider covering the 2.5% or 3% or whatever credit card fee. So their $100 a month would now be $102, $103 or something like that. I would like to think our members would check that box. The majority of them would check that box. I don't think all of us should subsidize the ease of credit card use personally. You can also set up automatic bank transfer if those that are using credit card aren't aware for that, or they're using the credit card to make that automatic monthly payment. Do it through bank transfer. There's no cost to the church. There's no cost to you at your bank. It's easy to do. You can do it on Realm. If you don't know how, contact the office. But that would save the church $2,000. Well, at least a chunk of that. So that's my soapbox on that one. Sorry. Let's see here.
Good information.
And I guess I'm a little surprised, and I'm sure Gene looked into this, but no water sewer increase or garbage increase. And the garbage increase would also tie into the recycling fee, which are all shown as staying the same.
Yeah, so we went with a rolling average with that, and we have had some changes in providers, so that impacts that as well.
Okay. And I know Gene and I have talked before about this, but custodial service, I guess I'm still concerned that we're paying $11,000, and what I see is not, in my view, I guess I'm curious if they're expected to do X hours a week or certain things a week. It just seems like at least the men's restroom is not clean on Sunday, and to me, it should be clean on Sunday, and it's not getting mopped or regularly enough to be clean on Sunday. There's many Sundays there's empty toilet paper rolls in the past, so I guess I really encourage that to be looked at closer, and whether we need to change or revise that with the contractor, but emphasize to make sure they're putting in the hours they're expected to do for
Right.
that amount of money. So
Yeah, and definitely, if you have feedback like that where things aren't getting done, like we're running out of toilet paper or things like that, if there's something that we can let the office know, so that they can let the cleaning crew know, hey, we need to keep on top of this. The more that we can keep everybody in the loop, the more that we can get the experience that we
well,
we
Jean
expect.
knows I've mentioned it many times. to
Okay,
her,
good,
so.
good. Thank you, and thank you for your work. You betcha. Oh. Okay, yeah, so the cleaning does include also the carpet cleaners that do come in, the Gemini cleaning, so that 4 times a year. So that is also included in that cleaning fee budget. Okay. So do we have anything else? Anything? And again, like I said before, if there's any other questions that pop up, if you're taking a look at the budget and you want to see anything else answered beforehand, give us all a shout out. We'll get together, we'll chat, anything that we can answer for you. So we want to make sure everybody's comfortable. Otherwise, I can pass this off to the next person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a shorter person, so I have to adjust this. All right. Thank you, Mandy and Jason. And thanks to all who pledged, to all the donors who made one-time donations or raised their pledges. We were able to reach a balanced budget because of you and because of the finance team's hard work in adjusting the budget. So if you have any more questions about the budget, please reach out via email or phone. Speak to us after this meeting, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So all the members of the Board of Trustees and the Program Council leader were called to serve by the Nominations Committee. Someone from the Nominations Committee was going to share more information about the candidates we'll be voting on at the congregational meeting. Do we have? Last week it was Carol Kendrick. So. All right, we do not have our nominations committee member here, but the nominees to fill those spots on the nomination committee are Lori Stratman and Emily Cameron Chatil. So do we have any questions about that process? Are there questions on the live stream about that? Okay. Right. Well, then our next topic will be Oscar's sabbatical. For 5 months from January 15th to June 15th, Oscar will be on sabbatical at a Unitarian church in England. And the board is very excited that Oscar has this opportunity. And this is also a tremendous opportunity for our congregation to reflect and grow as a church community. I will let Oscar share some more about his sabbatical.
So I should say I've talked about the sabbatical a couple times and written about it a couple times. And we'll talk about it more in my mid-year report at the congregational meeting and at the worship service on January 8th. So this is more an opportunity to answer questions. So to briefly go over what this is, part of my letter of agreement with this congregation is that every 4 to 7 years, ministers at this congregation go on sabbatical, both to rejuvenate, but also to learn and develop new skills and interests for ministry. So from January 15th to June 15th of 2023, Stacy and Ailish and I will be in England. We're going to be hosted by the Seven Oaks Unitarian Congregation, just south of London. While I'm there, I'll be preaching occasionally for Seven Oaks and also going around the country preaching at a lot of different English Unitarian churches. I will also be finishing my thesis, which is almost done. If you participated in the oral history project, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll be finishing writing that, graduating in May, so I will have finished that by the time I get back. Part of that will also be presenting that research. It's looking like at Harris Manchester, which is the Unitarian Seminary at Oxford. Then at the English Unitarian version of General Assembly. And then I'm submitting an application to present at General Assembly in Pittsburgh here. So the National UU Gathering. That'll be after I come back, but I won't know if that's approved or not until March or so. As far as what's happening here, there'll be a series of guest preachers. I've got printouts of the list if you want them. We'll have a mix of lay preachers from the congregation and folks from around the country and around the area here in Kansas and Nebraska who will be preaching. I'm actually a little bit sorry to miss this because this weird thing happened this fall where I emailed all of my friends and said, can I call in a favor? And all of them said yes. So we actually had more guest preachers at one point than we had Sundays, which is good. But I'm really excited to hear what some of these folks say. Probably the anchor will be Kiana Dene Perkins, who preached remotely last June here. She'll be preaching once a month remotely, I think on the second Sunday of the month, on a series on manifesting liberation. Other than that, the other document that we'll have, it's mostly done, if you want a copy of the draft form, is a thing that looks like this, that says, if I have a question about X, who do I call? This will have basically everything that I do in my day-to-day life and who you should call if you have questions about it while I'm not here. It is 3 pages long. Judy Hart will be taking over staff supervision while I'm gone. You are in great hands with this particular board and group of lay leaders. I'm really excited both about what it means for Stacy and I, but also what it means for us as a congregation and minister in relationship to say, what are we going to get excited about now? So I'll stop talking. My live stream has failed, so I will depend on other people to pull up questions from the live stream. But are there any questions here in the room? Oh, there it goes.
I always get chastised at work for asking too many questions at meetings, so sorry, just the way I was raised. So, do they live stream in England?
Presumably, yes.
Be interesting to find out. Oh, you can always watch your minister friends too on live stream.
Sure, yes, yeah.
So, speaking of that, how many of those will be video streamed, do you think, versus live at our pulpit?
Yes. We tried very hard to keep it to 1 or 2 remote ones a month. So the majority will be here.
Great.
I don't have that somewhere. That document exists. There it is. So for instance, in February, the first Sunday is Juniper Meadows, who will be coming down from Omaha to preach. The second Sunday will be Kiana Dene Perkins, who will be preaching remotely. The third Sunday is Sherry Woodbury, also from Omaha. The fourth Sunday is Gene Helms from here. Then in March, the first Sunday is a young adult service led by Allison Starr. The second Sunday is Kiana again. The third Sunday is Isabel Call from Manhattan, Kansas. And the fourth Sunday is Chelsea Krafka from here. So that's sort of the rhythm of it.
Yeah.
There'll be 1 or 2 that are remote because that's the world we live in. But that also means that we get to do things like invite Kiana Dene Perkins and Jennifer Brower and David Carl Olson to preach here, which is exciting.
It's a nice advantage of technology for that.
Yes.
So I know this was asked, and I got some other follow-up things after we're done with this, but I know it was asked, I think, last week, like, I know you want to disconnect from us. Understandable. That's what the point of sabbatical is, right? Not that you forget about us, but it's just not in the forefront of your mind. But maybe when you get there, you could get a little family picture in front of the church and send it back to us. At least, hey, we got here safe, and we'll see you in June.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll figure out how to do that. I know when Jean Helms was on sabbatical, she wrote postcards that got put up in the office. So maybe we'll do something like that. Other questions? Interesting. Any questions on the live stream? Oh, sure. Yep. Yes. Karen, I've got a printout. I'll send it I'll give it to Harry. Any other questions? Okay.
You know, 6 or 8 or 10 months in advance is a long lead time on some of these things. If events come up that ought to be addressed on a Sunday service, are we free to change that is somebody here at the church able to change that schedule if kind of circumstances would indicate that's the right thing to do?
So, for instance, if there's some major event in the world that we would normally change a service for, yeah. Everybody that's preaching here are pros is the word that came to mind, but it's also a lot of our worship associates. Every week, if there's something that comes up, we change the service, and that would remain the case. If something comes up on a Thursday, there is not a guest minister on this list who I wouldn't trust to handle it appropriately and with great care and passion. If I didn't have that trust, they wouldn't be on the list. As far as if something happens here in the congregation, each of those Sundays also has one of our worship associates or another lay member who's the primary point of contact. So I would assume that they would be in contact with whoever's leading worship that week to say, there's this thing that we need to address. We relatively rarely just pull a whole guest preacher out of the lineup to replace it with something else at the last minute. The only time that I could see that happening is if it's one of these that's remote and pre-recorded, and something comes up between the pre-recording and the actual Sunday service, but that's a rare occurrence.
Be the church president that would act in that case.
Yeah. So it would be the primary contact for the service, which is a layperson. There's one of those identified for each of the services, and they would take the lead on that. And I assume that they would be in contact with the rest of the leadership of the congregation.
I mean, the live person could be sick that Sunday, the guest speaker could be sick, whatever, so there's
Yep.
a fill-in there.
What am I looking forward to most? The the honest answer is sleep. So right, there's the honest answer, and then there's the better ministerial answer. The honest answer is that this fall I have been doing the research and then writing this thesis, and I've been doing that in addition to my day job, and so I've been doing that on my days off and tracking my hours this fall and working 60 to 80 hour weeks most of this fall. So I hand in a draft of that thesis on January 13th and then get on a plane on the 15th. And then I wait 2 months for my advisor to send back edits. So I assume that those first 2 months I'll be sleeping about 12 hours a night. Well, not with Ailish, but I'll be sleeping for 7 hours a night, taking her to school, and then napping for 5 hours a day. How about that? But the broader answer to that is that it really is an opportunity to say what is going to get us excited about ministry in Lincoln, Nebraska for the next 7 years. I talked about this at the last town hall, so apologies if you're hearing this twice. But the reason that sabbaticals are part of our tradition in Unitarian Universalism is that it is a relatively hard thing to have a long ministry that stays fresh and exciting, right? Most people have about 7 years of sermons. And so what a lot of denominations do is they just move you after 7 years, right? Or less. That's not the history in Unitarian Universalism, because we say that the choice to do that is between a congregation and a minister. And it's not the case at this particular congregation. I'm the third called minister at this church since 1961. Which is a whole thing. Charles was here for 35 years, Fritz was here for 17. I intend to be here for a long time. So the question becomes, how do you keep your ministry exciting and relevant and speaking to the needs of this moment, not the moment 7 years ago when you were called? And that's the purpose of the sabbatical for me, is to say, all right, what is going to be the animating question for me in the next 7 years? There's a lot of anxiety in that when you don't know the answer to it yet, but there's also a lot of excitement too to say, what could we be doing here? Especially in this moment where COVID's not over, but it sure feels like the animating questions of the last 3 years, I really hope aren't the animating questions for the next 7. And it'll be good to have a dividing line to think through that. Any other questions?
I have some, not about your sabbatical, so when that's
Okay.
I could ask those or raise those or discuss those.
Any other questions about the sabbatical? No. Okay. Other questions?
This is more strategic planning, I guess you could kind of lump it under in a way, but some of it's detailed. Like how many pledge units do we have right now?
As of January 2022, we had 283 the last time we certified. I don't know what the number will be after this
And
pledge
that
season.
would equate to how many members?
285
Okay. So our
in
historic
our last certification.
our historic membership trend is basically level, if not gone down slightly, perhaps.
It's gone down a little bit. Yep.
And I guess have other Unitarian churches of similar size, similar locations been facing the same thing?
Yep. I don't know that there's any studies done on Unitarian churches right now. I can tell you that I was at a conference of mostly progressive houses of worship. So churches, UU congregations, synagogues, in the fall, where they asked all the attendees, so about 4,000 around the Midwest, what their membership and attendance trends were. And the median was down about 20% in that group. Vanishingly few had stayed the same or increased. About a quarter had decreased 10%, half had decreased about 20%, and then the rest were more than that. So in that, we're actually pretty average. Our average Sunday attendance, when you count in person and online, is down about 20% since where we peaked in, say, January of 2020.
I know I've read for several years decreasing attendance at mainline type churches, which I assume are your mainline Christian, Protestant, and Presbyterian, and Catholics, and what have you. So, but we see full parking lots at a lot of these in Lincoln. So maybe Lincoln's an anomaly for attendance. I don't know, but so I guess I understand. There's some planning. It sounds like that's going to be looking at how do we do better on the budget or raising the funds, maybe starting sooner than August or whatever it was now. But and also how do we look at reaching out better to membership and attendance? There was always this talk about how they're decreasing in the mainline churches. That means there's a group of people out there we can reach out to and get. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's I guess if one had the crystal ball, they could.
Well, this goes
do
back
better.
to the animating question piece. So I'm going to break in for a moment. So to go through the history of those numbers over the last 7 years, because this is a thing that I've been thinking about a lot and will continue to think about a lot. Average Sunday attendance at this church has been 160 from 1961, when this building was built, to 2019. In the summer and fall of 2019, we did an enormous amount of work looking at that number. And we said this room seats about 200 people. Capacity in a church is defined as 80% of the number of chairs you have, so capacity is 160. And we've been there. So the limiting factor is this room, which is why in January of 2020, we added a second service. And I can tell you, in the 3 months from January of 2020 to March of 2020, our average Sunday attendance went from 160 to 225. Of the many things that we have lost during COVID and that I'm a little annoyed about, one of them is that, because we had just long enough to say, yeah, that experiment probably worked. So we've been set back by COVID. I think that's inarguable. Our average Sunday attendance now in person and online is about 120 to 130. But I'm not quite ready to say that we're part of this broad decline of mainline churches. I think we got knocked back on our heels attendance-wise during COVID, and that has implications for our membership, for our budget, for everything. But I don't think those are permanent effects. I'm not quite ready to say that yet. I think we're probably, it'll take a couple years to get where we were in 2019, but that's.
But among your Unitarian colleagues, other churches, particularly Midwest ones like us, maybe have been experiencing a similar number decline or attendance
no,
or
it's
budget issues as well.
We are, if Judy was here, she would tell you that she attends a group of lay leaders once a week, and we do better than a lot of churches. Yeah.
And I guess I do have one budget one. So if we assume fall rental, but the fall rental doesn't happen, what kind of a hit does that have on us for budget?
Yeah. So if we rent to Blue Stem in the fall, it's about $12,000 for the fall. We have a backup to Blue Stem that would be about $7,000 for the fall. The number that's in the budget is that 7,000 number. So it's assuming the more conservative case for our fall income. Now, if Blue Stem falls through and our backup falls through and we try and find a plan C and that falls through, then that would be a $7,000 hit. But we would work pretty hard to not go to plan D or E.
Thank you for your indulgence.
Sure. Any other questions about the sabbatical or anything?
You'll share more, you said, and
Yeah, I mean,
I'm thinking, I know you shared before about where, your anticipated service time there, like serving the churches there or other churches, but whether you want to say that for whatever date you said you'd be telling more about it, that's fine too.
yeah, I'll be preaching on sabbatical on January 8th, and I'll do a mid-year report next Sunday, actually. Yes.
Well, since you opened it up to anything,
Unforced error.
we have a couple fairly large doctrinal issues coming up. The eighth principle, land acknowledgement, and the consequences that might flow from that. At what point would the congregation be able to discuss that and participate in decisions about those issues? Is that strictly ministerial, or is this going to be a little more democratic than that?
It's going to be more democratic than that. And actually, this tees up beautifully. Thank you, Alan, for this one. There's a softball over the... come next Sunday, because I'm preaching on this topic. 7 days from now. So Alan's spot on. There's a couple big questions that Unitarian Universalism is grappling with right now. So I'll name them in order of priority, I think. There's a proposed eighth principle to the existing 7 principles. That was proposed 6 or 7 years ago. The first sermon I preached in Lincoln was about the eighth principle. Since then, about 250 congregations across the country have adopted it. This spring, one of the things that the congregation is going to do while I'm gone is consider whether to adopt that 8th principle. So that's actually the first service on January 15th, the day I get on a plane, will be led by the Beloved Conversations group of lay people here in the congregation. I had a meeting with them yesterday where they went through their plan for how they were going to engage the congregation in that conversation over the spring. So saying, this is the thing that the congregation is going to vote on in the spring meeting, and working back, what do we need to do to be ready for that conversation in May? So that's coming up. The other two big ones are that at the UUA national level, there's a proposed revision to Article 2 of the UUA bylaws, which includes the principles and sources. It is a large-scale revision. The UU bylaws require that we do this every 15 years. 15 years ago, we did it, and the vote failed, so the principles haven't changed for about 30 years. But it is now time to do this. The principles are from 1985. They were passed the same year I was born. It's actually more than 30 years now. So that's going to be voted on at General Assembly in June. And that's what I'll be talking about next Sunday. It actually requires votes at 2 consecutive General Assemblies. So there'll be a preliminary vote in June, and then we'll talk about it for another year, and then it'll need to be voted on with, I think it's a 2/3 majority in the spring of 24. That's 2. The third big one is that there is a race for UUA president that will also be voted on at General Assembly in June. That's voted on by the delegates from every congregation who attend General Assembly either in person or remotely. The congregation will choose who those delegates are in January or February, I believe. So those are the 3 big ones. All 3 of which I would encourage you to engage with the delegate process for General Assembly and to engage with the conversation that Beloved Conversations is going to be leading. Those are the big places to get involved.
Just a quick question. How many delegates can we send? And they can be either virtual or in person? Because it's hybrid this year?
Yep. They
Okay.
can be either virtual or in person. I believe it is 6.
Okay.
Right. So there's 6 delegates that the congregation can appoint, and then there are a number of delegates who are delegates from this congregation by virtue of office. So that's myself. Chelsea is the director of religious education. Fritz Hudson is the minister emeritus. Kimberly Debus as the community minister. But those 4 don't count against 6. So 10 delegates total, 6 that come out of the membership of the congregation. Jeffrey Lusk asks, Oscar has indicated that he will be presenting his final project at several locations next year. Will our church be one? Well, yes. You've already heard most of it, to be honest. But yes, it'll be after I come back. But we'll set aside some time this summer to talk through the final result. Anything else? All right. Well, it's almost 12:30, so I'm going to get out of the way.
Thank you, Oscar. These next 5 months will be a wonderful opportunity for all of us to figure out who we want to be going into the future. So there are many other board initiatives that will be shared at the congregational meeting with the board president's report, and then we'll also hear oral reports from the LUF committee, and Oscar will be sharing his oral report at the congregational meeting. Is there anything else you have been wondering about that has not been addressed today? Anything on the live stream? Well, thank you to all here, and thank you to those online. Meg will now share the closing words.
It's entitled Cherish Your Doubts by Michael Schuler, and he is a UU minister in Madison, Wisconsin. Okay. Should I repeat everything I just said? Okay. It's entitled Cherish Your Doubts by Michael Schuler, and he is a minister in UU minister in Madison, Wisconsin. Cherish your doubts, for doubt is the servant of truth. Question your convictions, for beliefs too tightly held strangle the mind and its natural wisdom. Suspect all certitudes, for the world whirls on nothing abides. Yet in our inner rooms full of doubt, inquiry, and suspicion, let a corner be reserved for trust. For without trust there is no space for communities to gather or for friendships to be forged. Indeed, this is the small corner where we connect and reconnect with each other. Okay.
I can do that. All right, this meeting is now adjourned. You may go in peace. If you have any other questions, please find one of us after the meeting. Thank you.